think about your physical fitness, how you do sit-ups every day, how you go for a walk every day, how you go for a run every morning, you should be doing the same type of thing with your creative brain, so that when some larger thing happens, you're not going to, pull a muscle. you can deal with it, and you can be quite fit, and it's like training like an athlete. Procrastination it's your subconscious trying to tell you something. So it might not be that you're blocked. Your subconscious is just saying that it's interested in some other thing that you're denying because you're afraid of going over.
This is the Native Stroke Show, episode 3 with Dominique Falla. Thank you so much for joining me on the show, Dominique.
No problem, Richard.
And for those who didn't know who Dominique is, she is the founder of Typism Global Community, and she is also better known as a Tactile Typographer. And she has a new book coming out next year as well.
Yes, I've got one I've just released, which is a little sort of quick pocket guide called Creative Space. But Creative Superpower is the big project that I've been working on for years, and so that's due for release next year. So the publisher's got it now, and it's in the editing process at the moment.
What does it cover about, like the creative superpower?
So probably 3 years ago, I came across the concept of the ikigai, which is a Japanese kind of formula for a happy life, and I thought that sounds good. So I looked into it, and I kind of adapted that idea for creative people, because a lot of my creative friends, and myself included, we have so many creative ideas, and we're just so kind of distracted by shiny object syndrome that we find it very difficult to pick one thing, because we feel like it means that we have to say no to all the other things. And so I started to wonder, what if I could use this ikigai concept but for creativity? So actually kind of overlapping the things that you enjoy doing, the things that you're good at, the things that other people need, and the things that you can get paid for.
Yeah.
And so from that idea, I sort of developed the creative superpower as being where those things overlap: your mission, vocation, passion, and occupation. And so that formed the idea. So the book is basically in 4 parts, and each section of the book asks you lots of questions, and then the idea is that you can kind of work your way around the ikigai circle and get to your creative superpower in the middle.
Yeah, and like you've mentioned, as a creative, we got distracted quite quickly, and it's I think we need that kind of a guide where you really can nail down what you wanted to do and what you wanted to achieve, because what happened is that you tend to lose in the whole process of it, and then you say that in midway you might say okay, I'm done with this, I'm going to start a new thing, and then you show another thing that is quite interesting, then you go jump on board on that again. And
yes.
in terms of that, Instagram plays a very important role, because you scroll your feed and then you see something and then you get inspired and then you start something again, and the social media as a whole, and in your creative space, the other book, you talk a lot about creative muscles and how we can utilize it, and the concept of taking a break for creative doesn't really work. That's what you've mentioned. So can you tell me a little bit more about that? That's quite interesting for me.
I think it probably comes from the idea that people talked about this idea of work-life balance as if somehow you do work and then you switch your brain and now you're relaxing, and I just think that's it might work if you have a really horrible or really tiring job. It's very easy to stop doing that tiring job when you go home and you just open a drink and watch television, and it's your brain has switched. But for creative people, that's impossible, because if you have a creative brain, it never stops, and you have to allow it all of the time and all of the hours. Even when you're asleep, you're still being creative, because often I'll wake up in the morning and my subconscious brain has obviously been working on something, and it tells me in the morning as soon as I wake up this new idea, and then I have to go and do it. So I think it's just crazy if you're creative to try and have some sort of work-life balance. And so the idea of being creative in the little breaks of time that you have throughout the day is the best way to get your creative projects done, because if you're waiting for this magical block of time where you can flick the switch and be creative, it's just not going to happen in that way. Creativity has to be listen to all of the time. So this is why I always make sure that I carry, a notebook with me and an iPad, and my phone is fantastic for taking notes and dictating into an app or something. So, I can be waiting for 20 minutes for my husband to get something from a shop, for example. And, I can write a whole chapter of a book in that time whilst I'm waiting, because I can dictate into my phone, So I think just being prepared to be, creative in those tiny little moments of time that are gifted to you throughout the day is the only way that your big projects are going to get done, because you'll never have a magic large amount of time. And even if you do, like coronavirus, we're all trapped in the house and we can't go anywhere. You still kind of get distracted with other things. If you've got the television and the kids and the washing and the cleaning and all of the other things, you have to just slice your creative moments into those little gaps throughout the day.
And like you said, as a creative person, we can't just switch it off. Like, for example, especially for me, I have a very hyperactive mind. So sometimes it's quite difficult to sleep as well, because you keep on thinking one thing, and then it leads to another thing, and then leads to another thing, and then by the time that you're already 2 o'clock or 3 a.m. in the morning. So
yes.
And for example, as a professional graphic designer, the whole day you're sitting in the office doing the same thing, and then you come back home, you're still thinking about the same thing, right? Yeah, like you've mentioned, it's quite difficult to switch off that.
Yeah, absolutely. But my argument is that you shouldn't switch it off. So you should just switch from work to passion projects.
Yeah.
So all those things that get you excited when you're, I mean, it might be for client work that you're getting excited when you're looking on Instagram, but it also might be for your own creative side projects. And I think that's what the Creative Superpower book is so important, is because it takes all those things that you wish you could be doing and weaves them together into some side project or some passion project, whatever you want to call it. I think if people view graphic design as work and then somehow they just want to go home and switch off like a normal person, I think that's not going to work. You need to just need to think of you're changing tasks and you're changing location. So when you're in an office, your tasks are to be creative for another person.
Yeah.
And then when you're at home or wherever you are, your task is to be creative for yourself. I think trying to switch off is crazy. You have to just push work away by putting your own creative ideas in your head instead.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also in that same talks that you talk about the creative space, you also mentioned that a creative thought process as a muscle, where you can't just run up a 100 sprint in one day. You just have to use a marathon technique. So would you want to elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so that's actually what the concept that started all of this was. I started thinking about creativity being a muscle, because what would happen is I would teach my students at university. So I teach graphic design at an Australian university, and I would see my students get busier and busier towards the end of the semester when their work was due. And so in weeks 10, 11 and 12, they were like athletes. They could bash ideas out. They were working all hours. They were really being creative and producing amazing work because they had a deadline which was forcing them to make the final assignment. But then what would happen is week 12 would happen. They would submit their work and then they go on holiday and they just collapse. So they went too hard for that final few weeks and then they crashed and they wouldn't do anything. They would go surfing or go on holiday and then they would come back the next year and start again. And it was like so painful to watch them trying to get their brain back into gear because they had been like elite athletes the year before. And now they were like, I said, you've got flabby brains because you've let your brains get fat, over the holiday. You haven't been exercising your brains. So from that idea, I started thinking about, your creative muscle and how instead of just over exerting it and then letting it get fat, if you just have a maintenance program, where you're actually just, it's like a physical fitness. You don't try and do all your running in one day. You do 20 minutes of running every day so that you get fit rather than breaking your knees, So that's the only analogy I can get, is that if you think about your physical fitness, how you do sit-ups every day, how you go for a walk every day, how you go for a run every morning, you should be doing the same type of thing with your creative brain, so that when some larger thing happens, you're not going to, pull a muscle.
Yeah,
You can deal with it, and you can be quite fit, and it's like training like an athlete. So I think creative people need to think of their creativity like as if you were an athlete in high performance. If you're a footballer, you have a whole training routine, and you're playing for the team, and you have a coach, and you have a fitness instructor, and you don't just play the match and then go home and watch television and eat chips. You're doing fitness and drills and all of these things. So I think if you treat your creative brain the same way, you'll be able to deal with things a lot better, and then you won't feel so tired and drained when you've played a match, which is like, doing a big project for a client. That's your job, but then the rest of the time you're still being able to get to the gym and do some other exercise as well. So yeah, just treating your creative muscle like any other muscle. And if you're a professional creative like a graphic designer, you should get a training regime for your brain so that you're behaving like an athlete and you don't burn out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And to that, do you believe in creative block?
Absolutely, but I also think that creative block is probably, there's lots of reasons for it. So we call it creative block, but if you actually pull it apart, each person's block is a very, caused by a different thing. So for some people, they might just be burnt out. So they've been very creative, and then they've just not been putting any petrol in the tank. So they're burnt out and they just need to stop. Whereas if people are trying to do something and they've been wanting to do something for a long time, like, I don't know, write a book or release a podcast, and they put it off and they put it off because they're blocked, then that's just fear. So they're afraid of, being judged, or they're afraid of failing, or whatever it is. They're afraid, and so they feel blocked and say that I haven't got any ideas or haven't got any time. Time is actually, lack of time is a creative block for a lot of people. They use it as an excuse when really they're just scared to start the thing and not do it as good as they would hope. So I think in each instance it's different, and I really try hard to work on strategies to get around those. So I'm pleased to say that I think I don't have creative block anymore, because I'm able to look at what's stopping me and clear it out quite easily.
Yeah, it's about having the clear part of vision as well, right? And like you've mentioned, the creative muscles, if we exercise that enough, I think we'll be able to overcome the creative block as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And for me, it's more like a distraction for me. Like, I'm too distracted. That's why I have a creative block sometimes.
But again, I still think procrastination it's your subconscious trying to tell you something. So it might not be that you're blocked. Your subconscious is just saying that it's interested in some other thing that you're denying because you're afraid of going over and trying something that's going to take you out of your comfort zone. And that's a perfectly natural thing. Your amygdala is part of your brain that tries to stop you getting killed. So it tries to keep you safe, and keeping you safe means only doing things you've already done before and that that you didn't die. So that's what your comfort zone is. And so your brain is just trying to save you from, eating the wrong berries or getting hit by traffic. So you just kind of say, thank you very much, brain, for trying to save me, but I'm happy that I'm not going to die if I, do this thing that's out of my comfort zone. So there's definitely strategies to get around all of these problems.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you first, I think you were the first person to coin the term tactile typography, right?
Yes.
And it's quite beautiful, especially the one that you did for the, the sun is also a star, which is quite famous.
Thank you.
And how did you
Yes.
how did you come about it? I mean, do you want to run through what actually get you into that?
Sure. So I trained as a graphic designer. So my undergrad was a bachelor in graphic design, and then I became an illustrator. So I did traditional techniques, painting with acrylics and watercolor. And I did that for a long time. And then I actually did a master's study when I was in Melbourne, and it was all about sort of illustration and creating, painting worlds. And so when it came time to do my PhD, I felt that I'd exhausted every side of the images part of graphic design. So, if you think of my original training was words and images as a designer. So yeah, I did all that. I felt like I'd created as many images as I needed to that were purely image based. And so for my PhD, I thought it would be interesting to go to the other side, which was typography. And I'll admit that when I was an undergrad at university, I didn't really get typography. I didn't quite understand it. I was interested in the pictures, not so much the words. But the process of researching for my PhD, I ended up doing illustrations anyway, which is quite funny now that I think about it. I ended up being an illustrator and doing book covers just like I did when I was an illustrator, but they had words on them this time. So I think it was that illustration pathway into words was how I sort of developed the idea of tactile typography. But specifically, something happened which meant that it triggered an idea, and off I went. So I was actually preparing for an exhibition. So, just as part of being part of a creative community on the Gold Coast in Australia, you get invited to be part of an exhibition every couple of months. And so I said, sure. And then I hadn't actually created anything because I was very busy at work. And then when I finally got around to doing it, I'd actually created lots of little vectors of animals and objects, and then I'd made a sort of negative space thing, and I was actually going to just print it. I just wanted a large scale print of this thing. But then when I finally got around to going to get it printed, and the exhibition was that night, the person who ran the large scale printer had actually gone home sick, and he locked up the office and I couldn't access the printer. And so I was in a panic because I had spent, hours on all this huge artwork. It was really big, like big. There was no way you could kind of print anything. But there was a vinyl cutter. The room for the vinyl cutter was actually open, and so I thought, well, they're vectors, I could cut it out of vinyl. So I quickly went to a hardware store and got a board that was the right size, and then the only vinyl that was there was white, and the board that I bought was white. And so I thought, this is going to be really interesting. So I vinyl cut it, and I got a friend to help me apply it. I used to work at a Signwriters, which is how I know how to apply vinyl. It's actually really difficult, but luckily I know how to do it. And so I had this shiny white vinyl, lots of little stickers all over a sort of a matte white board. And I took it to the exhibition and we hung it up. And then I just, started drinking champagne and forgot about it. But then what would happen is people would come up to it and they would say, "Is it okay to touch?" I was like, okay, you're in a gallery. Why would you want to touch the artwork? Because all around the gallery were plinths with objects on. So physical three-dimensional objects that you could easily touch. And there was all these paintings on the walls. But then there was my work, which was this shiny vinyl on matte white board. And I would say 12 people came up to me over the course of the evening and asked if it was okay to touch my artwork. And I was like, that's really interesting. There's something about my artwork that makes people want to touch it, whereas 50 other pieces in the gallery, nobody wants to touch those. So from that point, I was like, well, how do I make it that people want to touch my artwork? And so tactile typography was born. And so I probably did about 30 different techniques before I hit upon the string and nails technique. And the thing that I was doing as I was going along with my research was I was publishing the work as I was creating it. So I wasn't in a studio making 100 pieces and then just displaying 30. I would make a piece, put it on my website, make another piece, put it on my website. And so that meant that I was getting I wasn't getting a lot of interaction at all. I was getting no interaction until I put the nail and string pieces up, and then it went viral. Like, people just started sharing that one piece for some reason. It was crazy. I woke up in the morning. I think there was a design blog that I don't think runs anymore, but it was quite popular at the time, and she discovered it on my website somehow. And then she shared it, and then This Is Colossal, which is another design blog, saw it on her website and then shared it. And yeah, I had like 100,000 visits to my website in a 24-hour period. It got shared all over Twitter. It got shared all over Pinterest. Still, if you Google string art on Pinterest or look up string art on Pinterest, a lot of my stuff comes up still. So yeah, there was something about that particular string piece that I did that resonated with everybody. So it was just, for me, it was just technique number 30 out of 30 techniques. But because I was publishing them as I was doing them, I got to see which ones were, resonating with people. So for some reason, that one really did. And then that meant that I got a lot of fantastic commissions out of that. So I got flown to America and I did a 35-foot string and nails wall for Google. I got to do book covers for Penguin. I did some installations for Woolworths, which is a large supermarket chain here. You know, crazy stuff you couldn't plan. So I was very grateful for that whole period. But yeah, after a while, I mean, there's only so many ways you can wind string around nails, really. So it just kind of, I ran out of interest in it in the end, I guess.
But
yeah, very grateful for how that all happened.
yeah, but the process would be quite different. Is it? I mean, since you're doing it and physically, with a material and life size, the process
Yes.
would be quite different from just digital design.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Even though there's a digital component to it. I mean, it's funny because everything was hand drawn first and then I would sketch it and then I would vector it. And so it would go through the computer to be, the actual artwork would be vectored and then that would have to be printed out and then turned into a physical object again. So yeah, the studio was very much analog digital. I was switching between the two on a regular basis. The other thing to remember is as an illustrator, I had a lot of hand skills that I think the average digitally trained graphic designer probably doesn't. And also as a child, I did a lot of craft. So, I think I had all these skills that I, didn't really think of them as being useful until it came time to do all this stuff. Because people would look at me working on these pieces and just say, how do you know how to do this? How do you know how to sew? How do you know how to push holes in bits of paper? How do you know how to wind the string? How do you know how to hold a hammer and nails? Like for the average, my 19-year-old students who've only ever held iPhones and laptops, for them it was like some magical, mysterious process. But for me, it was sort of built on what I'd already been doing. I
And
guess.
do you think it's important that do you suggest that every digital artist should also get their hands dirty?
100%, yeah. I've been talking to a lot of people about just the death of handwriting, for example, because handwriting's not taught in schools anymore and they just give children laptops and iPads. And I was actually talking to one of my PhD students, Libby Reed, who is doing her PhD on handwriting, and she went and interviewed some surgeons in the hospital, and they were saying that the students they're getting now aren't very good at being surgeons because to hold a scalpel and to hold, to do the sewing up and the cutting, the very fine cutting that you have to do when you're a surgeon of a human body, then they don't know how to hold something because they're not used to holding a pen or a pencil as a child. And so their hand, to hold this thing and have these fine, minute, they just don't have those skills because they've got really good thumbs, and mouse clicking fingers, but they can't hold things. And so their fine motor skills are just dying out, apparently, according to these surgeons. So I really think it's a problem, yeah. And I also think that, that's why typism has been so popular with people, is because if somebody can figure out how to make their iPad pencil or a calligraphy pen or a paintbrush or a pencil or a Sharpie, if they can figure out how to make that do amazing things, it gives them a whole edge over graphic designers who've grown up just using a computer. So I think that's why typism is such a hit with people who, they might be great on the computer, but there's hand skills as well. And I think they need to be developed as soon as possible. If you try and pick up a pen when you're old and you've never done it before, it's going to be really difficult.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reason why I got into hand lettering as well in the beginning. Probably 4 or 5 years back, because I was a little bit frustrated with the just controlling everything from the mouse and the keyboard, and then you can't move beyond that. It's just a mouse and a keyboard every day. So I was in the quest for doing something that I can use my hand with, and then controlled the environment or the artwork or the final product that I'm working on. So then I stumbled upon the hand lettering, and I think that really helps me with understanding the typography aspect of it as well, because I did a lot of research on the calligraphy, and I would say I'm just a noob there, but I didn't get to where I wanted to be, but at least it gives me a good foundation on the typography or the typeface in sector. Yeah.
and that's it. Every single typeface that somebody uses on a computer, the original foundational form of that was created by somebody using a tool in their hand. There's no such thing as a digital typeface. All of the foundational script fonts are all based on calligraphy. All of the foundational serif fonts, they're all based on brush lettering and then stone carving into, a rock wall in Italy. So, I mean, everything is based on calligraphy or, some sort of hand-drawn. Even the typefaces like Garamond and Gaudi and Palatino, they were all drawn by somebody first before they were digitized in the 80s. So, it's absolutely the foundation of every digital typeface that you ever use. Not to mention sign painting. I'm just looking in the thing behind me. That's been hand painted, even though it's Helvetica. It's been hand painted by a sign painter, using a brush and a mile stick. So it's not. It looks digital, but it literally was painted by somebody by hand, even the small letters. So, it's absolutely essential that if somebody wants to be a good digital artist or a good graphic designer, they have to have that foundational knowledge, and then it's even better if you can do it yourself, by hand, create that stuff by hand.
Yeah, exactly. And then the feel, I think the feel is different when you get down with your own hands and then create something. Although finally your final product might be a digital one, but when you start the foundation from having something, like for example, I was creating a poster for a documentary film, so I wrote the title with my hand. The title of the documentary, so it gives a little bit of a different feel to that. So that's what I enjoy as well.
It gives you the edge. It gives you the edge over other graphic designers. If all they've got at their disposal is a box of typefaces and you've just walked in and created something with hand lettering, there's a reason they should pay you over the person who just used the typeface from the computer. Your 15-year-old nephew can use the typeface on a computer. So it's absolutely, it makes the graphic designer have more chargeable skills, skills that are worth, they have a value, but it also means that the end result is completely unique, that there's nothing else is going to be exactly like that. The example I like to give is it's like cooking. I mean, you can, if you grow all the vegetables and chop them all up and prepare the meat and make a beautiful meal. If you go to Mexico and there's the chickens running around and they've ground the spices, they make you this Mexican meal, and then you come home and you open a packet of Mexican seasoning. It's not quite the same. It's kind of Mexican food, but it's not the real thing. So, for me, people just turning on a computer, they're just making packet food, especially if they're using templates. It's packet food, and that's fine. You won't die. But it's not an amazing dining experience. It's not like going to Mexico and having the spices ground in front of you and eating the food, that's made in the place where it's meant to be. It's that authenticity. It's the layering of all the meaning that goes into something. It's the understanding of where it's all come from, as opposed to just consuming the end result. That to me it's the difference.
And also it makes you think a lot more when you're using your hand. That's what I feel. Other than just using the digital interface, because what I feel is that when it's too easy, with the digital interface, everything is at your disposal. You can just it's like a magic wand. You just spin it and then it's there. But when it's when it's a traditional way of doing it, like the hand lettering, by the time you write the second paragraph and you've messed up one word, there's no going back. You just have to restart from the scratch.
That's right. It's a very zen process, isn't it? Especially calligraphy, that you can't just command Z or command Z and just undo it. You're stuck with the mark that you made. So of course that's frustrating, and sometimes if you're in a hurry or you've got to get something for the client or to print, then of course the convenience is much better. But if you're really wanting to get into the moment, then calligraphy is a fantastic way to do that. And what I like is, the mixture of both. I like the fact that you can have the foundational stuff and you can create it, but if you do make a mistake, Photoshop, fix it. So it's good to be able to have the two technologies. I'm not suggesting that you should just be out there digging in the fields. I mean, it really is, it's about using those techniques, but then using the best that everything has to offer and combining it to make a fantastic end result, as opposed to just choosing one path
Yeah.
or the other path. It's great to combine them together.
While talking on the line of this, I would want to raise a question where, what do you think about being a generalist as a graphic designer? Do we need to be a generalist, or?
This causes a lot of arguments, this discussion. I think, okay, here's what I think. When you start out, you should be a generalist. You should try everything. You should give everything a go, because you can't sit there and decide that you like pasta over cheesecake just by looking at it, right? You have to eat pasta and you have to eat cheesecake to work out which one you like and which one you don't like. So when you're starting out, I think you should be a generalist. It means that you're going to get more money. It means you're going to get more jobs. It means you're more employable right out of the graduating from university. So that is how you should start. But then I really think that your goal, and this is why I wrote a book called Creative Superpower, I really think that after trying a bunch of stuff, you really should be working towards working out what your creative superpower is. What is the combination of all of your things that's going to make you completely unique? So for people in the branding world, they might call it finding your niche, like actually working out who you're going to target. But I think you should find your own niche first before you then start working out what other people want, because after a while you're going to be very miserable doing all of the things for other people. I think that as you get more experience, and I think as you start to work out what you love and what you don't love, that you should start focusing on just doing more of that stuff that you love. And so that's why I think that procrastination is useful, because if you're working on a trucking poster for a client and yet you would much rather be on Pinterest looking at flowery t-shirts, illustrated t-shirts of flowers, you know what I mean? Maybe it's time to wind down the trucking posters and start illustrating more flowery t-shirts, because the fact that you're drawn towards that is telling you that that's the work you'd rather be doing. So in the end, I think you should be born a generalist and die a specialist is probably the quickest way that I can say it. Start wide, and then your goal is to narrow as much as you can. So the more experienced you get, the more clients you get, the better you get at stuff, the more you're going to be able to say no to the things that aren't in your wheelhouse and yes to the things that really make you stand out. And then after a while, you become the best person at that particular weird overlap of things, So I mean, for me, for a moment there, I was probably the most famous string artist in the world. I mean, that may or may not be something you want to do, but it was weird enough that I could own that niche. You know what I mean? It was narrow enough and small enough. And in the end, people who commissioned me to do those projects, they didn't even know that they needed that until they saw it. They weren't going around going, let's find someone who can do string art. They actually saw it because it became famous enough that it was visible, that they then saw it and went, that's cool. We want that. Who does that? Oh, this is the person who does this. Let's get her. And then after a while, everybody started doing it. I got ripped off a lot. So it's time to get out of that niche. I couldn't own that niche anymore because I made this tiny niche and then it expanded because people jumped on board. So that's why I got off, and it's time to do something else. But I think that, really spending the later part of your kind of professional career working out what you're the best at in the world, however weird and tiny that little overlap is, and then really getting ownership of that. I think that's what people should end up
And you
doing.
talked about being ripped off and all of this stuff. At the end of the day, nothing in this world is new. That's what they used to say. So how would you draw the line between inspiration and plagiarism?
Well, I mean, in this case, they really were ripping it off. So one girl, she did an absolute, nail by nail copy. So, I mean, it literally was a piece that I had done, recreated. She did it much larger, but, and I just thought, oh, okay, cool. And then, but no, the thing that got me was, it was that book cover. Because I'd done a few in different languages. And so I did one in Portuguese. And then I saw a video that I thought was actually my video. I actually thought it was me. And then I posted it on my Instagram. And then somebody said, oh, I didn't know you did a Spanish one. And I'm like, no, this is Portuguese? And she goes, no, this is Spanish. And then I had a closer look at it, and I wear this ring all the time. And that ring wasn't in the video. So somebody's hand was winding the string. It didn't have this ring on it. And it blew my mind. I'm like, someone's ripped my project off. They've gone and the Spanish publisher has gone and got somebody else to rip off my process and the behind the scenes video and the finished cover. They've ripped off everything to the point where I didn't even know that it wasn't me. And I was just like, that's it, I'm done. If I'm too expensive and they're going to the effort of copying every single thing I do that slavishly, I'm out. I'm out of here. I'm done with that process, and it's time to do something else, because that was it for me. So yeah, somebody plagiarized an actual finished piece, but then when they actually plagiarized the process and the video and everything, and it was actually for the project that I'd started, I was just like, I don't want to be doing this anymore.
That's too far. I mean, they went too far on that. I mean,
yeah. But in terms of your question about inspiration, yeah, I mean, you have to copy to learn. Like that's how you learn. But you also have to be aware that just because you made something and it looks cool, you shouldn't then probably post it on social media, because the person that you copied off is going to be pissed off. So that's, being inspired by somebody's great. You use that to learn. But just like, to bring it back to the athlete metaphor, if you're an athlete running a track meet and you're at the event and this is the competition and that's where you won the medal, that's what they televise. They don't televise all of your training and all of your sit-ups and all of your workouts. They're preparing to do this finished thing. Nobody gets to see. So I think that using other people's work for inspiration, you think of that as your messy, sweaty first sit-ups. You don't show people that stuff. You're working towards an event where you are the winner. You're the person doing the final thing. It's you out there on the track giving everything and showing it publicly. That's when you should be sharing your work, is when it's much more of you than it is of something else that you're copying just as an exercise. So, but it's very difficult because, people get excited and they want to share it, and they don't realize that it looks like they're trying to pass it off as their own work. So, and there's all these tutorials. That's another thing that's difficult, I'm sure, for people is, if you package your signature style into a course and then you teach people how to do your style, you can't get upset when there's all this work all of a sudden appearing on Instagram that's in your style, because they paid you to teach them how to do it. So, but again, in the end, I think if you've paid to take a course and then you do the work from the course and then you post it on Instagram, again, everybody's aware that that's a technique that's been taught to you, and it's now up to you to take that and maybe combine it with something else or bring in some other interest so that you're not doing the exact kind of activity. It's learning a technique in order to then make your own piece of work. So I think there's no excuse for plagiarism. It's got to be that you put your own creativity
and also
into
I think
it.
it has to do with you have to be honest about it, right? Even if you're if you get inspired from, for example, I got inspired from your work, and then I do something on the line and I say that, okay, this is inspired by this, I have done this to experiment or something like that, to be blunt about it.
Yes. But the issue is then if somebody commissions you to do another piece of work that looks like that work, that's when you get into trouble, is because you've just published something as a homage to somebody else. But then if you get work and they say, can you make me a piece that looks like that, then it's very difficult for you to then go, no, you should probably commission the person that I've just tagged instead of getting me to effectively now rip off that style. So I think it's very dangerous to post your experiments on Instagram. I think there should be much more, the private workouts, and then I think that the work on Instagram should be more work that you've created for your own purposes, because you might get commissioned to do some of that work. You've got to think very carefully about that.
And do you think that designer as a whole make a good marketer?
Designing, I think if you have marketing skills, you're going to be a better marketer than a marketer without design skills. I don't necessarily think that they're two separate ideas, but it tends to be that you end up having to do marketing just because, design often needs that to happen. So it depends on where you work. So I have students that are social media strategists and they don't do any design, but because they went through a design agency or design college, they're better social media strategists than the ones that didn't. They might have come straight out of marketing university. So I think having a sense of how it all fits together is really important. The analogy I like to give is architects and builders. So, the architect doesn't build the house, but they need to understand how it's built. Otherwise they'll design some stupid, crazy, thing that's a dream, a fantasy. It's not going to work. But also you need to have that crazy brain, because otherwise if you get a builder to build a house, it's all the regimented sizes and nothing is difficult. So I think, marketers have their techniques, and I think design can bring creative, resolution to those techniques. So I think the two things work hand in hand. But yeah, if you're going to be a freelance designer, you bet you got to learn marketing. That's just like you have to learn accounting. You've got to learn how to invoice somebody and pay tax and do your quarterly statements and all of that stuff. It's just another skill that if you're going to be a freelance designer, you're going to have to learn. So I think accounting and marketing, web design, social media, how to take photographs. All of a sudden now you've got to make videos. So everybody's got these microphones and lights in their studio. So yeah, there's just new things that everybody has to learn to do. And for some people they hate it and some people they love it. And, it's just...
And also with
one of those things.
In today's world, you really need to know how to do your own videos.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, probably until about 6 months ago, you could have said that you can get away with not doing videos, but now everybody has to literally be on video to even do their job. So, for us, getting the students at university to get on camera was very difficult. But, they're all getting over it. So I'm hoping that the next wave of design graduates are going to be much more video savvy. Just because they've had to go through this whole process of everybody being online. So it'll be interesting to see actually how it works. But yeah, I've got studio lights in my studio now, and I'm having to get more comfortable with video just to talk to people. So it could well be that it's an easier step now to actually make my own videos. So who knows?
And also with the the introduction of new technology now and then, I think the AI and automation process plays quite a lot of role in the business sector, whether it be any industry for that sake. So how do you see the graphic design role changing in the next near future?
Well, I think we've definitely been through a lot of changes. It actually occurred to me yesterday, I found a website called remove.bg, which has AI which removes the background out of anything. I remember one of my first jobs when I graduated from university was horrendous. It was, making clipping masks of objects. So you would have a catalogue, and then someone would take 300 photographs of shorts and shoes and sunglasses, and then somebody, me, the intern, had to, clip around these things manually. And then I just dragged this file to this free website. Whoop! Much better job than I could have done. It's easy when it's white background, but she had hair and there was a yellow background and there was a bit of a shadow. Boom, it clipped it out perfectly. And I'm like, that is when artificial intelligence is brilliant, because that's just, it's stopped somebody doing a slave wage job, because that's horrible to make somebody have to go through and clip out all that background. So I love that you could get all of those 30 images done in, 30 minutes rather than 30 hours, which it would have taken a human to do. So in those instances, I think it's fantastic. Let's get out of the boring stuff so that we can move into the creative stuff. The issue comes when you've got designers in first world countries competing with designers in second and third world countries for, templates or doing things cheaper. So living in a first world country, I've seen the job satisfaction of the creative graphic designer go down quite rapidly, because, there's somebody in Thailand making a beautiful web template for $40, because $40 for him is pretty good. And, this global economies means that, everybody has the same technical skills, but some global economies mean that you need a lot fewer dollars to live on every week. And so it means that if somebody in a first world country is purely competing on speed or money, they're going to have a very miserable life as a designer. So, I think those changes have meant that I think in the end people are going to be paid for their perspective and their point of view rather than their ability to cut out 30 pairs of sunglasses quickly. I think it's really changing. We shouldn't be paid for our ability to move pixels around a screen quickly or cheaply. So it's come as a horrible shock to some people that they're getting undercut regularly, and so their job satisfaction's gone down. And it's just you've got to use your design skills in a different way if that's what's happening to you, instead of sitting around and whinging about it. So I think in the end, designers are going to have to be much more entrepreneurial and work out ways to, sell things that people actually need, as opposed to just doing things quickly and cheaply, which is what a lot of designers think is their job.
You bring up the labor thing and then economical differences. I think that is going to be quite a big discussion later on down the line, because some designer in India would do something that half the price of what is available in the US, and then I have got a lot of clients who say that why is your price different from other places, why is your price much more higher when you are sitting in India? So I tell them that just because I'm sitting in India doesn't mean that my price has to be cheap. I can charge you the same price as a graphic designer in the US, which doesn't make me a less designer than them, right?
Yeah.
But they don't understand.
That's right.
Yeah. But some people don't understand that.
Yeah. And look, that's the difference. Well, I mean, the job of every designer is to educate people on value versus time. So, if you're a taxi driver, then it's on time, right? You set the meter and then it's away you go. And if you're doing creative work where it might take you no time at all, but it's of great value to the client, the value is what they should be paying for it. It should matter where the client is, not where the designer is. If the designer is in America but the client is in Thailand, then you can understand that they wouldn't be able to afford American dollars for the same thing. So you've got to look for the result that you're getting as well as what it's worth to you in terms of money, not where the design is located, what their cost of living is, and how long it's going to take them to do it. That's like, you're not a taxi driver. So it's just about educating people about the value of the thing you're going to create for them rather than who you are and
and
how
also
long it's going to take you.
with the introduction of a platform like Fiverr, you can that is disrupting the market really badly, I think, to me personally.
But I think that's good, because as a graphic designer, when I used to get the clients, these days, because it used to drive me crazy, you'd have people in and they would come in and start negotiating on price, and they would think that they could do it or that they could get it done cheaper. I'm like, good, go. I don't want you to be one of my clients, because you're actually going to be more trouble than you're worth. For ones like that who say, I could just do this, or I want to be able to do it myself, I'll make it for them as a template in Canva and give it to them. And here's my affiliate link to Canva to log in and go and do it. You pay Canva and you do it yourself. And I can design the template for you or not. So I'm happy for those services to be there, because they're taking those pain in the ass clients that don't value design off my hands. And they're, you don't want them as a client. It's not any client at any cost. That's a bad business model. And I know it's difficult to say that if you're trying to put food on the table for your family, you will take any project. But I think building your value, building your skills, and making it so that you can charge more, and so you don't have to take those little crappy jobs, then I'm perfectly happy for somebody on Fiverr to charge $5 to do it. And then in the end, Fiverr has their own models where they upsell, and if you want it quickly, you get to pay $40, and they've worked all that stuff out. And I know there are some people on Fiverr making a reasonable living, especially if you're living in India or Thailand rather than Australia. So I think there's a place for everything, and I think it's wonderful for those countries that aren't Europe, America and Australia. It's wonderful for them to have marketplaces which allow them to put their services in front of Americans with American dollars. So I think that from a global perspective, it's wonderful. But yeah, if you're a high cost designer, you shouldn't be dealing with those clients anyway. So it just forces you to value yourself more highly and also to improve your skills so that you are able to charge more and not feel like you're
Yeah,
being
exactly.
argued with like you're a taxi driver.
Talking about client, is there such thing as bad clients in your vocabulary?
Yeah,
How do you deal with
probably
them?
75% of them. And they're not, I mean, they're not bad clients, they're just the wrong client. You're the
Yeah.
wrong, it's like there's no bad husbands. It's just he's not good for that wife, you know? I mean, it's you can get divorced and get a much different husband who he divorced his wife, but he's great with you. It's about the compatibility. It's not about the individuals really. But yeah, for me it's about, you know, making sure that you're a fit. And that's again the problem where you're a generalist. You have to say yes to everybody, and not everybody is going to be a great client for you. So I think if you can specialize, if you get known for that speciality, you can charge whatever you like, because if somebody's coming to you as a client, they want what you've got. You know, I mean, this is why famous Hollywood actors are able to charge stupid amounts of money. It's because, you know, they know that if you want a particular person that's going to give you a performance like Kevin Hart,
The
then you have to
brand,
pay for
yeah.
Kevin Hart. You know what I mean? Like there's a specific, the brand, everything that comes with it, that he's going to bring his audience. He's going to show up and deliver a particular thing. There's going to be no surprises when Kevin Hart appears in the movie, right? You know what you're going to get, and all of Kevin Hart's fans are going to go see the movie. Same with Tom Cruise. You know, it's like he might be a pain in the ass as a human, but I will probably go see a Tom Cruise movie because I know it's going to be a Tom Cruise movie. So as soon as you can kind of elevate your brand to that level where people are coming to you, then you can charge what you like, but also you know that they're not going to try and change you or get you to do some other thing, because you know that they're wanting you to do more of the same thing that you've already done. So once you get known for something as a specialist, then I think you're in a more of a bargaining position
true.
for lots of
And
reasons.
if you are going to learn something new today, what would you pick? Oh,
Me,
why?
Facebook ads. I need to learn how to do Facebook ads. I am so scared of Facebook ads because I'm so scared of wasting money and them not working. So that is absolutely a skill set that I do not have any knowledge of, and I know that I have to become pretty much an expert in Facebook ads if I'm going to take my businesses to the next level. So that would be the next skill. So I've got courses and things. The other thing I would like to do is start a YouTube channel. And again, I don't really know how to do that. I mean, obviously I know how to upload a video to YouTube, but there's a bunch of strategies that I would really like to learn first. So they're the two
Yeah, I'm
things on
still
my
figuring out the
learn
YouTube
next
thing
list.
because I don't know how their algorithm works, and it's quite difficult to understand. All right, Dominic, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to talking to you again on the
No
podcast.
problem.